Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark.
I used to think horror conventions were the safest places in the world. Thousands of horror fans in one building. People laughing, people trading VHS tapes and fake blood, people dressed as monsters for fun. It felt like the one place where everyone understood the same strange love of fear, the same fascination with things that lurked in shadows and crawled out of nightmares. For years, I went to every convention I could find. Haunted expos, late-night horror festivals, even the tiny hotel ones where the fog machines barely worked and the masks looked cheap. Nothing ever felt dangerous, because everyone there knew the same unspoken rule. The horror was always pretend, the blood was syrup, the screams were part of the show, and the monsters were just people in costumes. That's what I believed the night my friends and I drove 3 hours to a place called HorrorCon. It was supposed to be the biggest horror convention any of us had ever seen. A whole warehouse filled with creature effects artists, mask vendors, horror actors, and haunted attractions. Belladonna could barely sit still the entire drive. Kane kept joking we were going to die in a haunted house. Damien said something about the place feeling wrong the moment we saw the flyer. I laughed at all of them because I thought we were going somewhere safe, a place where people dressed like monsters. What I didn't understand then, what none of us understood, was that some monsters don't hide in the dark. Sometimes they turn on the lights, open the doors, and invite us inside.
Belladonna had been waiting 6 months for HorrorCon. She stood on the cracked asphalt of the Expo Center parking lot with her arms crossed, vibrating with barely contained excitement, while a river of black-shirted horror fans stretched all the way to the entrance doors. The building rose above them like a concrete bunker, enormous and windowless, its flat gray walls plastered with neon banners that screamed HorrorCon, one night only. Floodlights washed the parking lot in harsh white beams. Fog from somewhere inside the building drifted lazily through the entrance doors every time they opened, rolling across the ground like a living thing. Belladonna grinned. "Tell me this isn't the greatest thing you've ever seen." Kane leaned beside her, chewing gum, staring up at the banners. "I'm just saying, if we get murdered tonight, this is a pretty cool place for it." Damien didn't laugh. He had his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket, eyes scanning the people in line ahead of them. "There's something weird about this crowd." Belladonna groaned immediately. "Oh my God, Damien! We're at a horror convention. Everyone here is weird." Elvira stood quietly beside them, watching the slow flow of people moving toward the entrance. Music thundered faintly from inside the building, heavy guitars vibrating through the concrete walls. The line lurched forward. More fog rolled out through the open doors. It smelled like popcorn and rubber masks. But underneath that, something metallic lingered in the air. Elvira wrinkled her nose. Ahead of them, a man dressed as some kind of monster turned slowly to look back at the crowd. His costume was incredible. Gray skin, long teeth, black eyes. Too realistic. He stared for a moment longer than normal. Then he smiled. The line moved again. "Tickets ready," a voice shouted from the entrance. Belladonna clapped her hands once, thrilled. This is going to be amazing. None of them noticed when the massive steel doors behind the ticket booth quietly slid shut and locked. The first thing Belladonna noticed when they stepped inside HorrorCon was the fog. It rolled low across the floor in thick gray waves, drifting between people's boots and pooling around vendor tables like mist in a graveyard. Colored lights pulsed through it. Deep red, electric blue, sickly purple, turning the enormous convention hall into something halfway between a nightclub and a haunted house. Belladonna inhaled deeply. "Okay," she said, grinning. "This place already wins." Kane let out a low whistle beside her. The building was enormous. Rows upon rows of vendor booths stretched into the fog like a crooked city. Masks hung from display racks. Fake blood bottles gleamed under dim lights. Posters of slasher films from the 80s and 90s covered black curtain walls. Somewhere deeper in the building, heavy metal music thumped through giant speakers. The crowd moved slowly through the aisles, thousands of horror fans packed shoulder to shoulder. Everywhere Belladonna looked, monsters wandered the floor. Zombies dragging their feet through the fog, vampires bearing plastic fangs for photos, demons with curling horns and glowing red contact lenses. The costumes were incredible, better than anything she'd ever seen. "See," Belladonna said, nudging Damien. "Worth the drive." Damien didn't answer right away. His eyes moved slowly through the crowd. "Yeah," he said eventually. "Just really committed cosplayers." Elvira stood quietly behind them, watching a vendor hang a row of rubber masks on a metal rack. Each face looked disturbingly real. The vendor noticed her staring and gave a slow, polite smile. Too polite, too still. Elvira looked away first. The smell in the air was stronger inside. Popcorn, burnt sugar, rubber latex. But underneath it lingered that same strange metallic scent from outside. Kane sniffed once. "Anyone else smell pennies?" Belladonna laughed. "That's fake blood, genius." Ahead of them, a tall sign hung above one of the aisles. Ultra-realistic monster masks. Belladonna's eyes lit up. "Oh, we are absolutely going there first." She grabbed Kane's sleeve and pulled him toward the booth. Behind them, the fog thickened slightly, and somewhere deeper in the convention hall, someone screamed, but the music was loud, and no one paid it any attention. The mask booth looked like something out of a nightmare. Rows of faces hung from metal hooks behind the vendor's table, swaying slightly in the slow drift of fog. Pale faces, wrinkled ones, screaming ones. Each mask molded with eerie realism. Every pore, every wrinkle, every vein captured in latex detail. Belladonna stopped dead in front of the display. "Oh my God." Kane leaned in beside her, chewing his gum slower now. "Okay, those are actually pretty gross." The vendor stood behind the table beneath a flickering red lamp. He was tall and thin, dressed entirely in black. His own mask, a gray, hollow-eyed monster face, covered everything but his mouth. When he spoke, his voice sounded smooth and oddly soft. "Ultra-realistic silicone work," he said. "Best in the business." Belladonna was already leaning over the table, fascinated. "How do they look this real?" The vendor smiled faintly. "Allow me to demonstrate." He lifted a hand to his face. Slowly, he peeled the mask upward. The gray monster skin folded away like rubber. Underneath was a human face. But something about it felt wrong immediately. The skin looked too smooth, too pale, as if it had never seen sunlight. The vendor held the mask up for them to see. "See," he said pleasantly. "Layers." Belladonna forced a laugh. "Okay, yeah, that's impressive." But Damien hadn't laughed. His eyes were fixed on the rack of masks behind the vendor. They weren't identical. Every face was different. Different wrinkles, different expressions, different ages, as if each one had once belonged to someone. Damien swallowed. "Where do you get the molds for these?" The vendor's smile widened slightly. "Live references." The fog shifted between them. For just a moment, Elvira noticed something strange about the vendor's exposed face. It didn't move when he blinked, not the way skin normally should. Like something underneath was wearing it. Belladonna clapped her hands once, breaking the silence. "Okay, we are definitely buying one." Behind them, the crowd pressed closer around the booth, and somewhere far across the convention hall, another scream echoed through the fog, longer this time. Still, no one reacted. Belladonna left the mask booth with a plastic bag swinging from her wrist. Inside it was one of the vendor's faces, an elderly man with hollow cheeks and cloudy eyes. The silicone was disturbingly soft when she squeezed it. $10 says I scare the hell out of someone with this," she said. Kane smirked. "You already scare people without the mask." They drifted deeper into the convention hall, carried along by the slow-moving crowd. Fog curled around their ankles, while lights flickered across the black curtain walls dividing each attraction. Ahead of them, a narrow aisle opened into a darker section of the floor. A sign hung crooked above the entrance. "Live horror demonstrations. Kane leaned closer to read it. Live demonstrations of what? Belladonna shrugged. Probably stunt stuff. The hallway beyond the curtain was much dimmer. Red bulbs glowed weakly overhead, and the music from the main floor faded into a dull throb behind them. A small group of people had gathered near another booth farther down the corridor. Behind them stood a girl about their age, dressed as some kind of vampire, plastic fangs, fake blood smeared across her chin. She shifted impatiently. "Is this line moving, or what?" she muttered. Then a hand reached out from behind a black curtain beside the booth. Quick, silent, the girl vanished. Just like that. The curtain swayed once. Belladonna blinked. Did she just... Kane laughed uncertainly. Okay, that was actually a good trick. But Elvira hadn't taken her eyes off the curtain. Behind it, something moved. There was a wet sound, a heavy dragging noise, then a single choked scream. It cut off almost instantly. The hallway fell quiet again, except for the faint hum of lights. Belladonna shifted uncomfortably. All right, that's actually kind of intense. Damien stared at the curtain. No, he said slowly. That wasn't a performance. A voice suddenly crackled over the loudspeakers overhead. Cheerful, enthusiastic.
Welcome, horror fans.
Applause erupted somewhere on the main floor.
Tonight's attractions are just getting started.
Behind the curtain, something swallowed. The curtain hung motionless. Belladonna stared at it, waiting for someone to jump out and shout boo. No one did. The hallway behind them buzzed with distant music and laughter from the convention floor, but here the air felt strangely still. Damien stepped closer to the curtain. "Don't," Elvira said quietly. But he was already reaching out. His fingers closed around the edge of the black fabric. For a moment he hesitated. Then he pulled it aside. The room behind it was small and dimly lit by a single swinging bulb. At first, Belladonna didn't understand what she was looking at. A table, metal hooks hanging from the ceiling, dark stains across the concrete floor. Then she saw the girl, the vampire-costumed girl from the line. She was lying on her back, her arms twitching weakly against the floor. 3 figures crouched over her. They looked human, at least at first. One lifted its head slowly when the curtain moved. Its face was buried in the girl's throat. Bright crimson fluid coated its mouth. The creature blinked at them. Its pupils were thin black slits. Belladonna's brain struggled to make sense of the image. Actors, special effects, some kind of extremely realistic performance. Then the girl made a soft choking sound, and the creature tore another piece of flesh free. Belladonna staggered backward. Oh my God! The other 2 figures turned. Their smiles were too wide, too many teeth. One of them unfolded upward to its full height, its jaw opened far beyond anything human. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the creature lunged. A metal pole crashed into its skull before it reached them. The creature collapsed sideways with a wet crack. A young man stood behind it, gripping the broken display pole like a spear. Dark hair, leather jacket, wide-eyed but steady. "Well," he said breathlessly, "that answers my question about whether the costumes are real." The other creatures were already rising. He glanced at the group. "If you guys know where the exit is," he said, lifting the pole again, "now would be a fantastic time to mention it." Behind them, screams finally began spreading through HorrorCon, and the lights started to go out. The lights flickered once, then half the convention hall went dark. A wave of screams rolled through HorrorCon like a storm breaking over water. At first it was scattered, confused laughter, people assuming it was another performance, but the sound changed quickly. It became raw, panicked, real. Belladonna ran. She didn't even remember deciding to move. One moment she was staring at the feeding room behind the curtain. The next she was sprinting through the fog with the others crashing beside her. Behind them something slammed into the hallway wall. The creatures had recovered. "Move!" the stranger shouted. Onyx, he'd said his name was as they ran. The 5 of them burst back onto the main convention floor. What had looked like a carnival of horror only minutes ago had become chaos. People shoved through the aisles between vendor booths. Display racks toppled. Masks scattered across the floor like discarded faces. And everywhere, monsters. The grinners moved through the crowd with impossible speed, jaws splitting open as they grabbed screaming victims. One of the skinwalkers peeled its borrowed face away mid-stride, revealing something pale and twitching underneath. Belladonna's stomach turned. "This isn't real," she gasped. "It's real enough," Onyx said grimly. A creature lunged from the fog beside a booth. Onyx swung the metal pole. The crack echoed through the hall as the thing collapsed. Kane grabbed Belladonna's arm and pulled her around a fallen display table. "Exit," he said. "Find the exit." But the aisles twisted into narrow corridors of black curtains and fog. Every direction looked the same. Above them, the loudspeakers crackled to life again. The same cheerful voice filled the building.
Attention, valued guests.
The lights dimmed further.
Tonight's interactive hunt has officially begun.
A roar of delighted snarls echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. Elvira felt her chest tighten. "They're announcing it." "Of course they are," Damien said breathlessly. "This whole place was built for it." Somewhere behind them, something enormous stepped out of the fog, and the hunt truly began. The fog grew thicker the farther they ran. It clung to the floor and curled around the booth walls, swallowing the aisles until the convention hall felt less like a building and more like a labyrinth of drifting gray corridors. Belladonna's lungs burned. Every direction looked the same. Black curtains, flickering lights, overturned displays. Somewhere behind them the monsters howled, the sound echoing through the cavernous space like hunting dogs closing in. "Loading docks," Onyx said between breaths. "Buildings like this always have them." Damien nodded immediately. back service corridors. They shoved through another curtain and stumbled into a narrow concrete hallway. The difference was instant. No music, no fog machines, just exposed pipes, humming fluorescent lights, and dark stains on the floor that Belladonna tried very hard not to think about. They ran. Footsteps pounded behind them. Something tall moved at the end of the corridor. The wax-like creature from the convention floor, its long limbs unfolding as it stepped into the light. Elvira froze. It was enormous. Its melting skin glistened under the fluorescent bulbs as it tilted its head, studying them. Then it began to move. Not fast, just steadily closer. "Nope," Kane said loudly. He grabbed a loose metal cart beside the wall and shoved it down the hallway. The cart slammed into the creature's legs, slowing it just enough. "Go!" They burst through a steel door at the end of the corridor. Cold air hit Belladonna's face. The loading dock outside stretched wide beneath pale early morning light. For a moment, none of them spoke. They had made it. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. Kane bent forward with his hands on his knees, laughing shakily. "I take back every joke I made tonight." Belladonna looked around at the others. Damien, Elvira, Kane, and Onyx leaning against the wall, breathing hard but smiling. "We're alive," she whispered. Onyx lifted one hand in a tired thumbs up. "Best convention ever." None of them noticed the blood slowly soaking through the sleeve of his jacket, or the thin bite mark hidden beneath it. Epilogue. 2 weeks after HorrorCon, Elvira was walking home from work when she saw the flyer. It was stapled to a telephone pole outside a convenience store, bright neon paper glowing under the streetlight. She almost kept walking. Then she saw the logo. Her stomach dropped. HorrorCon, one night only. Different city, different date. Same design, same screaming red letters. For a long time she just stood there, staring at it while traffic rolled past behind her. They had searched the news for days after that night. No reports. No missing persons alerts. Nothing about a convention turning into a massacre. It was like HorrorCon had never happened, like the building had simply packed up and moved on. A laugh broke her thoughts. Elvira turned. Across the street, Kane and Belladonna were arguing over something ridiculous while Damien tried to referee. And beside them stood Onyx. He leaned against the hood of Damien's car, smiling easily as he listened to their bickering. For a moment, everything felt normal again. Almost. Then Onyx rubbed the back of his neck and glanced toward a nearby storefront window. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Elvira watched his smile falter, just slightly, because for a second, there were too many teeth. The streetlight flickered. The reflection looked normal again. Onyx laughed and turned back to the others. Elvira didn't say anything. But later that night, lying awake in the dark, one thought kept circling her mind. HorrorCon wasn't just feeding monsters. It was making more.
I didn't tell them about the bite. I almost did. Back in the parking lot, when we were all laughing like we'd survived something impossible, I almost rolled up my sleeve and showed them. But the truth is, I already knew what they would see. And I didn't want to watch their faces change. The wound doesn't hurt anymore. Not really. It just itches sometimes. Like something under my skin is trying to move. Earlier tonight, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For a second, I didn't recognize the smile looking back at me. Too wide. Too many teeth. I think about HorrorCon sometimes. About the fog. The masks. The screaming. And the strange part is, the more days that pass, the less it scares me. In fact, I think I understand it now. Why the monsters invite people inside. Why they turn on the lights. Why they open the doors. Because sooner or later, everyone wants to come back.